Good morning, everyone. We are starting this morning the portion of Vayakhel, and usually Vayakhel and Pekudei are the last two portions from the book of Exodus, Shemot. Many times they are combined, but this year they are separate. However, our discussion is going to be from both parts, from both sections, because they will be able to explain an important part of this week's Torah portion. We are starting from Likutei Sichos, volume 16, the first talk of the Rabbi. So just an introduction. In this week's Torah portion, it starts, Moshe gathered the entire Jewish people. That includes men, women, and children, which is unusual. And he tells them, these are the commandments that God has commanded you. First thing is keep Shabbos. Second, no work should be done on Shabbat. And then he goes on about the putting together all the material that they were contributing and actually creating the walls, the roof, the entrance, and all the furniture. And it goes through the details. We are going to concentrate today. Later on, we're going to talk about the walls. Today, we're going to concentrate on the roof. Actually, the roof was made out of 3 layers. Let me just explain that. The first layer was made of izim, goat's skin, goat's hair, actually. The second one was made out of sheep skin, wool that was colored blue and red or purple. And the third one was the orot chashim. Tachash is a very unique animal that was created only for that time. We don't know what it is exactly. How were they placed, the 3 layers? There are various opinions, and you can see it in every chumash that comes with illustrations. But we are going to take, and it doesn't really matter, is that they were on top of each other, not one third, or one half, one material, another half, another material, but actually they were one on top of the other. When it comes to the actual bringing the material, I'm reading 2 verses, chapter 35, verse 25 and 26. 25 is just so you have the knowledge when we come back to. The Torah says, V'chol isha chachmat lev, any a wise, intelligent person, beyadea tavu, she did the tapestry with her hands, vayaviu matveh, and they brought in the tapestry, et atchelet ve'et argaman, the blue and the purple sheep skin that they made from the wool, et tolat hashani ve'et hashesh, the linen and the other material. This is the verse 25. The crimson wool and the linen. Then comes 26. V'chol hanashim, all the women, asher nasa liban otan bechokma, that the heart lifted themselves with wisdom, tavu et ha'izim, they weaved the goats. The goats meaning the wool that came off the goats. Now, anytime, says the Rebbe, that there is a difficulty in the Torah, Rashi will address the difficulty. If Rashi does not address the difficulty, it must be not so difficult and easy to understand, or Rashi already addressed that previously. Says the Rebbe, in this week's Torah portion, Vayakhel, and the next Torah portion, which are twin sisters, there are so many questions about Rashi, and we will use one example from this week's Torah portion and next week's Torah portion. And actually, the Rebbe chose those 2 because one will actually answer. By the time you answer one, it will answer the other one. Rashi, on verse 26, and verse 25 does not say nothing. On verse 26, remember the goat wool, the goat hair, whatever it is, says Rashi, tavu et ha'izim, they took the goat hair and they weaved it. Says Rashi, it was an extraordinary, wise, intelligent type of work. שמעל גבי העזים טבעו אותן. They weaved and created this, so to say, blanket or roof on top of the goats while the wool was on the goats. Again, they did weave the hair of the goats, not after shearing it and then creating strands and weave them together and make a nice layer to create as a roof on the temple, but they did it on the goats themselves. Is that clear? Therefore, the Torah says, a separate verse, וכל הנשים, all the women, אשר נשא ליבה אותן בחוכמה, that they had in their hearts lifted them to do something wise, they tavu et ha'ezim, they weaved, they created those tapestries. That's Rashi. The Rebbe is going to, They removed them from the goats and sewed them together, all the pieces, into one large one.
Because the goats had to stand still while they're doing this.
Oh, the goat standing still is not a miracle. You can do it very easily. You give them some food and they will stand for a long time. It's not a problem. You can hold them. You can lift them and hold them. I grew up in a village with many goats and sheep, and you know it's not that difficult. They are domesticated. The Rebbe is going to ask three questions. The first question: what's the big deal? What's so special about doing it on top of the goats while the goats are still alive? They didn't kill the goats. The goats are alive and they weaved and they created the blanket, and later they sheared it off. By the time they took it off the animal, it was complete, and they took from the next goat and the next one, and together they made a big tapestry. What's so special about it? In fact, says the Rebbe, it seems that it should be a much more less beautiful, because when you do it on top of the goat, it creates a lot of difficulties and challenges where you don't have, because if you have one spot does not have long hair, or the hair is not the same color you want, the color you wanted, you can't just skip. When you have it off and you create your own strands, you have control. The control is much better. And Rashi does not address. Second question, the Rebbe says, remember I shared with you at verse 25 about the blue and crimson wool? It says over there that the women, that's what it says, the verse before, 25. It says, V'chol isha, every woman, chachmat lev, that has a wisdom in her heart, beyadea tavu, in her hands they weave, vayaviu matvet atchelet vet argaman, they brought in a sheep wool that is in blue and purple, and they brought it to Moshe. Rashi does not say that they did it on the sheep. Now, if you're telling me that this is an extraordinary service of God to do it on top of the goats, how come by the sheep, a verse before on blue and purple, it doesn't say, Rashi does not say that. And it's the same words. It says, V'chol isha chachmat lev. Chachmat lev means extraordinary intelligent. Rashi doesn't say they did it on the sheep. Only by goats, he says that they did it on top of the goats. And the third one, this is the portion of Likutei, so I'm going to share without reading the text. In the portion of Likutei, we read that after they built everything. Bezalel did the ark, and together they did the menorah, and they did the table, and they did the walls, and they did the tapestries for the roof, and they did the entrance. They brought it all to Moshe, and Moshe blessed them. And then Moshe is the one who had to build it. Moshe is the one who put it up together. And actually for 8 days, he put it up and he took it apart, put it up, took it apart, 8 days. By the 8th day, he did it finally. That's in Likutei. So far, so good. If you read in Likutei, says the Rebbe, that when they brought it to Moshe, the goat skin for the roof were brought first, and then the beams from the wall. And the Rebbe says, I don't understand. Why did they bring the roof before bringing the walls? The question is far bigger, because we read we read that there was a debate about the actual construction of the temple between Moshe and Bezalel. Anybody heard the dispute? Some of you do. Moshe told Bezalel to build the furniture first, the altar, the menorah, the table. Bezalel says, if someone build a house, they first construct the actual structure, and then they fill it up with furniture. So you got to do first the building, first the temple, and only then you can do the menorah, the table, the altar, etc. And Moshe says to him, Bezalel is your name. Bezalel in God's shadow, meaning you heard it from God. That's what God told me. This is, it appears in this week's Torah portion, actually. Says the Rebbe, if you follow the ordinary construction, you never put a roof before the walls. Yet, over here, when they brought it to Moshe, they are bringing first the goat skin and the wool and purple skin, and then they bring in the wood. It doesn't make sense. In addition, if you look into Ruma and Tetzaveh, when God gives the order about the construction of the temple, the order is first walls, atzei shittim, and only then the wool and the goat skin. So I don't understand. God, in the God order, you find that clearly the walls come first. But when they bring it to Moshe, the goat skin comes before the walls. It doesn't make sense. Why? So these are the three questions. Again, number one, what's the big deal about bringing, weaving the goat skin, of the goat hair on top of the goats? Number two, if there is an advantage, why only by the goat hair and not the sheep? And number three, how come when they brought it to Moshe, they brought in first the roof, the goat's hair, and only then the walls?
I have an answer for that one.
Let's hear.
That it's more delicate, more intricate work on the roof. So before you even bother with the walls, make sure that the roof is ready to go, and then you can put it all together. You don't want to put up the walls first and then have the roof that's not ready.
Why?
Because then you get, I don't know, the walls are standing
Have you
there.
been involved in construction?
Never.
Okay, I've been many times. The trusses that come on top can come, there was back order during COVID. There were no trusses, there was no wood, nothing came from China.
Okay.
So what happens is you put the walls and you wait, and sometimes it takes 6 months.
Okay.
The roof was not there to support the walls. The walls have sockets that were in the ground,
Right.
and they had a lot of support. The roof was there just to cover as a proper place for God to rest. So
Okay.
there is no advantage in putting the roof before, to bring the roof before you go to wall. Actually, you can't do anything with that. You can't do anything with that because you don't have a roof, walls. How can you put a roof? And the Rebbe says, Tosfot, on this discussion in the Talmud says, because they cannot have bare walls. The tapestry did not cover only the roof, but it also covers the walls. And therefore, immediately when they have the walls, they had to have the roof. Okay. That's why the roof came first. The Rebbe says it doesn't make sense to me, simply because we read that they brought everything to Moshe. And then Moshe had to construct it. They couldn't bring to Moshe only part of the Mishkan. They had to bring everything, including the roof and the walls. So the way Moshe did it, he put the walls and then he put the tapestry on top of it. Why is it that they brought first the roof and the walls? If it is to prevent the walls to be naked without any covering, they're not going to be covered, even if you bring them later, because they brought everything to Moshe and they put it in line one after the other, and they told Moshe, here are the walls, here is the roof, and here is how you're going to do it. Moshe knew he's going to do the walls and immediately put in other words, says the Rebbe, at the end of the day, Moshe is the one who constructed it. They had to prepare all of it to make it ready to be used, right? Moshe did it right. He put the walls and then he put the roof. That's what it says that he did. The question is, why when they bring in it to Moshe, we read about the goat's hair, in other words, the tapestry for the roof, that is coming before the walls. And it's very important, the order. If the Torah says that, it means that the goat hair came before the walls. So if they had less wagons, which one they schlepped to Moshe's backyard? The roof, and then the walls. It doesn't make sense. You get the trusses after you have the walls up. Says the Rebbe, in order for us to explain, to address this, there are two other questions we need to address. The first, in the Rashi, we go back to Rashi. Rashi says that this type of weaving on top of the goats, Rashi says, he calls it umanut yetera. Yetera means extraordinary. Umanut means a workmanship, extraordinary workmanship to put the goat skin and to create the tapestry on top of the goats. But if Rashi's source is the Gemara, says the Rebbe, probably it's in the Gemara does not say umanut yetera, not workmanship, extraordinary workmanship, but chokhmah yetera. Chokhmah is intelligence, extraordinary intelligence to be able to create it on top of the goat skin. Rashi does not say extraordinary intelligence, but extraordinary workmanship. Why is Rashi changing it? And the second question, Rashi tells us that this was a workmanship, intelligent, extraordinary workmanship, but it doesn't tell us what it is, only afterwards. Here are the words of Rashi. It's fascinating. Only the Rebbe can find it. The Rebbe says, if you read in Rashi, verse 26, that's the verse we're dealing with, it says the following. I'm getting there. Says Rashi, it was an extraordinary workmanship, that they have weaved or created the tapestry on top of the goats. Says the Rebbe, first tell us what they did, and then you can say extraordinary workmanship, and not the other way around. Always, you want to say something is very significant and very extraordinary, tell us what it is, and say, this is an extraordinary. That's the way Rashi does all the time. Here, Rashi says it was an extraordinary workmanship that they put the goat's hair on top of the goats. So these are two questions in Rashi. Here is the Rebbe's answer, and Rebbe finds it in Rashi. It's unfathomable for me to find it in Rashi. It's the Rebbe's genius, Torah understanding. The Rebbe says the following: the goat skin, the goat tapestry from the hair of the goats. There is two qualities that are beneficial. Number one, to bring something from a level of a living animal, which is far greater than something that is already dead. What's the example? Where do we see the benefit? Living creature cannot become impure. If I shear the goats, and I take and I make strands, and I weave it to a nice tapestry, if an impure person touch them, what happens? It becomes impure. What happens if it's on the animal and I did it? An impure person can touch it all day. Animal, a living creature, can never become impure. If it's a kosher animal, they can never become impure. So if I go and take an animal to the temple to be slaughtered, I have to make sure there is no blemishes. I have to make sure it's a proper animal. But I don't have to check if she ate a dead animal, if she ate a non-kosher animal, if a man that's impure touched the animal. As long as the animal is alive, that is not an issue. Therefore, therefore we see that when you bring sacrifices to God, from the dawn of time, men brought sacrifices from animals and from the plant and from the inanimate, like a hand of flour or oil. Cain and Abel. Cain brought an animal. Abel brought what? flax, right? Or the other way around. So Abel brought from an animal, Cain brought in from flax. In other words, from the plants. You can bring as a plant to God as a sacrifice. So therefore, when you bring the goat skin, the goat hair, and create a tapestry, you can bring it after you took it off the animal. Now it's a lower level. It's the animal. It's the level of inanimate. Why? It doesn't change. The way you got it off, that's the way it's going to be. Wash it, clean it, and use it. If it's on the animal, it still grows. If it grows, it's part of the animal's skin. And therefore, there is a great benefit to doing it of the goats themselves. But Rashi says, there was an extraordinary workmanship, not intelligent. Rashi is referring to a second benefit, doing it on the goats themselves. And that is, says the Rebbe, because it was created while the animal is alive, they are very much softer and much more moist because they're part of the animal. They keep growing. And therefore, it signifies a workmanship. In other words, by the time you take it off the animal, says the Rebbe, it will forever have a much different fluffy sense, and you can bend it, you can change it. The looks is always shinier. In other words, it's not just that what you bring to God is elevated to the level of animal as opposed to a inanimate, but also the outcome after you take it off their body, it will forever be of a greater quality. Have you heard of cold beef?
Sure.
The beef is here and the beef is there, but yet you're going to forever that animal. I never had cold beef, but I know people will pay $400 a pound. Why? It tastes different.
Okay.
If it's kosher, of course. Now, when it comes to the goat hair that was weaved while the goats are still carrying it, it's a whole different quality. That's why Rashi starts by saying, umanut, not chokhmah. It was an extraordinary, they knew that. In other words, you have got to be an extraordinary workmanship to know you can have the hair from a goat after it was sheared, or you can have the hair of a goat that is still on the goat. And when you do it off the goat, everybody can notice the difference. And that's the extra workmanship work. That, what? Just that will explain the other question that Harry is asking. What about the previous verse? It says, "V'chol isha chokhmat lev, vayaviu et hatchel v'dargaman," of the sheep. Says the Rebbe, by the sheep it's impossible because it had to be dyed in blue and purple. You cannot dye the animal because the Rebbe says the following in the commentary. The Rebbe says, even if you take your time to do one hair at a time, by the time you are done half, you will have another animal, another half the animal will move around. And more importantly, says the Rebbe, by the time you get it off, the animal will grow, continue growing, so there will be a part that was never painted. Therefore, in other words, there is a debate if they brought in the sheep wool and they painted it later, or they bought it all painted. In this verse, it says "Atchelet v'targaman." Sheep it does not mention. We know it was wool of a sheep. It doesn't say. It was blue and purple. Blue and purple, says the Rebbe, you cannot do it while the animal is alive, because by the time you're done, the animal will grow. Once the wool grows, there is a part that's not painted. Yes, therefore, they had to shear the wool of the sheep, paint it, dye it in blue or purple, and bring that to Moshe. However, the goat skin, the goat hair, they did it on top of the goats, not because they wanted, not only because it's chokhmah to bring a much elevated type of sacrifice to God, a dedication to God, a contribution to God, but also they were able, their workmanship showed in the material itself to be of a greater quality. It was more moist, and therefore it was much, much easier to walk with. It looked better, it felt better. Now we can address other questions. Bob, you had a question?
Well, I just thought it's interesting that you can have when they decorated and the tapestry, the combination of linen and wool.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't.
Not allowed.
It's not, you can't wear it.
You're not allowed, right?
But you're allowed to,
Shutness.
you're allowed to have it as part of.
They use it for different parts of the temple, except the garments of the Kohen Gadol, according to all, was a mix.
Mhm.
So the
Okay.
prohibition is only against wearing an apparel.
Right.
But not against, okay.
Right.
So today, for example, if you had a tapestry that was linen and,
Wool, you have to burn it.
okay, so.
Not allowed to sell it, not to give it away, not allowed to benefit. You have to burn it for no benefit.
It's only wool and linen together.
Right,
If
right.
If it's a synthetic or something like that, that's okay.
Synthetic is not wool, synthetic is not linen.
But you could have it for the temple. You
The
can't-
garments of the priest,
And the high priest.
the high priest only.
But the ceiling is shutness.
So the shilling was not shatnez because they were sitting on top of each
They're
other.
not woven together.
And some say they were two separate, two halves. But that's why I told you, we're not gonna get into that. That's not the point of our discussion.
Okay, well.
I just want to get into the third question. The third question is, why would they bring in the roof, the tapestry for the roof before the walls? I said to you, when God gave the commandment, the walls, the atzei shittim, the wood, the acacia wood came first. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand. Because it was still on the goat's back, they wanted to prevent some of the pain to the animal. Imagine they carried a tapestry that weaved out of the hair of their back. Therefore, they had to take care of it as soon as they can. So the first thing they do is have to bring it to Moshe. If they cut it before Moshe gets it, the quality of bringing it in from a higher level of living animal is not there. Therefore, they had the Torah specifically mentioned that came first, before the walls even, before anything else, by the way. Why? So Moshe should be able to share it of the animals. So the animals is free now to walk around without carrying that extra burden. Did you understand that?
So they brought
Ali,
the live sheep.
They bought the goats themselves, yeah. And Moshe is there to share it and take it. That's why they had to bring it first, because by bringing it first, what did they do? They prevent pain from the animal. The Rebbe, every time the Rebbe speaks, most of the time, it says Yeina shel Torah. Yain is wine. Wine has a quality that it affects the brains, right? If you drink a lot of wine, 4 cups of wine, you know what happened? You can drive after that, right? That's why in Passover you shouldn't drive. Now, every time the Rebbe spoke, he says, let's find the wine of Torah. Torah is compared to water, meaning this is simple in the Rebbe's level. But there is a much deeper point to be described here. And it says the Rebbe, I am not going to, this is maybe politically, so to say, touchy. I am not going to address side issues, but believe me, it's wonderful, and I'll be happy to address afterwards. There is a debate whether women were allowed to contribute to the temple. You know why? When are they building the temple? Only by day. It says it's forbidden to build a temple at night. If so, it's called mitzvah taseh, a positive commandment, shazman grama, that has a set time. Any mitzvah that has a set time, women are forbidden, not forbidden. They don't have to. And therefore, if others are obligated, they push away. They say to the women, we have an obligation, let us do it. Says Rabbi, the Torah tells us in this week, Vayavo anashim al anashim, the women came first. In other words, the women gave more than the men. Here you hear about the women with their wisdom, they were able, men didn't know how to do it. Women, not only they know how to do it, but they saw the benefit, as I shared with you, that the hair of the goats creating the tapestry was actually a far greater quality, and it's being shown. You can see it. If so, how come the women were participating? Says the Rebbe, there is a very famous rabbi called the Ragachover from a town of Ragachov. He lived in the time of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He lived about 120 years ago. he has a book. The Rebbe says that if anyone was close to Rambam, it was the Ragat Shover. And the Ragat Shover addressed this question, and he says that in the building of the temple, there are two components that must come together. Number one, to fulfill God's commandment to build. God says, Vasuli Mikdash, you have to build. And that commandment has a set time. You can do it only by day, not at night. But there's another commandment. That commandment is to create a place where you can bring sacrifices to bond with God, to atone for your sin. That part has no time limits because they brought in, there was the fire has to be on the altar, continuous. The menorah light has to be continuous. In other words, in the building of the temple, they fulfill two parts. One is time limit, the actual construction. The other part is a place where we can bond with God, bring sacrifices, atone, ask for God's favor, etc. Says the first part, you can say women do not belong to because it has a time limit. Therefore, they should not be participate. But the other part, to create a house for God where we can bond and connect to God, where God is resting among us, has no time limit. That's the Ragat Shover. Therefore, the women were allowed to bring. Says the Rebbe, that will explain why, when it comes to the tapestry of the goat skin, of the goat hair, they did. It says that they did with their intelligence and they brought it to Moshe. Says the Rebbe, the previous one before, and it was the blue and the blue and crimson. I think I shared with you there were 3 layers of the temple. Mm-hmm. According to the Talmud, in order for God to rest in the temple, to bring sacrifices, it's enough to have the first layer. The other 2, God commanded us because God gave us specific details. However, what if I don't have it? If it's unfit? If it got, the Gemara says if it blew by wind. A strong hurricane came and blew off the first layer and the second layer. As long as there is the first layer there, the bare minimum is fulfilled, and you're allowed to bring sacrifices. So the Rebbe, therefore, the first tapestry, they have the right to participate. The second and the third is already part of the construction, but not part of bonding with God, because that bonding is already achieved by the first one. That's why the Torah tells us that the women had the extraordinary workmanship for the goatskin, because this was the top one, the last one. Otherwise, if they did not have the extra workmanship, you may not be able to accept that from them. But only because they were able to do it different than the men, that the men could not do it. Therefore, you accept it. When it comes to the blue and purple, the Torah is not talking about doing it on top of the ship. You know why? Because the women can do it in an ordinary manner, because it's part of creating a dwelling for God, to bond with God. Did you understand that? Mm-hmm. Says the Rebbe, this lesson teaches us 2 important lessons. The first lesson is Tsa'ar Ba'alei Chaim, that they had to change the order. God says, bring wood for the walls and bring roof. And then they brought actually the roof, the goat skin first before the walls, simply because you want to prevent pain to the animals. Second lesson is, when the women had an extra workmanship ability, you realize it was done for the service of God. So each one of us has to build a temple for God. We have an obligation to build a temple. If God gave me a talent that is unique, it's not because I can earn more money or I can have more free time, but rather I should use it to building my temple, to connect with people, to serve God, to make this universe a much more beautiful place where God is happy to celebrate and be there with us. And that's the lesson from this week's portion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.